The girl was tied to a fence by her cruel in-laws until the rancher rode in. She comes with me. She had dreams of living a life filled with respect, love, and freedom, but fate had a different plan for her. At the age of 18, she was married to a man chosen by her parents, someone they believed would provide her a stable life. They didn't know that his family, the in-laws, carried a cruelty that had been hidden behind smiles and polite words. At first, Aisha had tried to adjust. She worked tirelessly in their house, cooking, cleaning, and tending to the small garden. She did everything expected of her without complaint, hoping that if she worked hard enough, they might begin to accept her. But it was never enough. Her in-laws found fault in everything she did, the way she swept the floor, the way she cooked the rice, even the way she tied her hair. Every day brought a new criticism, a new humiliation. They whispered cruel words behind her back, laughed at her mistakes, and sometimes, when no one else was around, they raised their hands against her. Her husband, who was supposed to be her protector, remained silent. He ignored her pain, choosing instead to stay in his room or leave the house for hours, leaving her alone with those who hated her. The small comforts that she had known in her childhood, smiles, gentle words, safety, were gone. She felt trapped, living in a house that seemed like a prison with walls that held nothing but harshness and anger. One evening, after a long day of backbreaking work, Aisha had tried to speak up. Her mother-in-law had scolded her for burning the bread. "You can't even do this right. How did your parents let you leave the house looking like this?" she had yelled, waving a rolling pin as if it could strike fear into Aisha's heart. Aisha had lowered her head, trying to hold back tears. She wanted to explain that she had been distracted because she had seen a rabbit trapped in the garden and had tried to help it, but before she could speak, the father-in-law had joined in. "You are useless. Why did we even accept you into this house?" he bellowed, his voice echoing in the small room. The neighbors might hear, but it didn't matter to them. They were more interested in showing their power than in fairness or kindness. Aisha felt her chest tighten with fear and sorrow. For the first time, she realized that no matter what she did, she could never satisfy these people. That night, as the moon rose high in the sky and the village grew quiet, her in-laws decided to punish her for what they called disrespect. They dragged her outside to the wooden fence in the backyard, a rough, splintered structure that ran along the edge of the property. The fence had seen better days, but it was strong enough to hold her. They tied her hands to the cold wood with thick rope, securing her so tightly that even moving an inch hurt. Her feet dragged against the dirt, and her hair was pulled back painfully. Aisha's heart raced, but she refused to cry out. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her weakness. The village was mostly empty at this hour, and the stars twinkled overhead like distant eyes watching silently. The air was cool, but her heart felt heavy and burning. She thought about her family, about the love she had left behind, and she wondered if she would ever see them again. For the first time, she understood the depth of despair that cruelty could bring. The night stretched on slowly. The wind whispered through the trees, but it brought no comfort. Aisha's back ached against the fence, and her wrists were raw from the rope. She thought of the neighbors who might have helped if they had known, but she remembered that the village had always been quiet, and people often turned away from others' problems. She whispered a small prayer, asking for someone, anyone, to come and help her. Hours passed, and the darkness seemed endless. She tried to distract herself by thinking of better days, imagining the life she wanted to have, one filled with freedom, laughter, and respect. She remembered the stories her mother used to tell her about brave women who never gave up, who faced impossible odds but eventually found happiness. She clung to those stories like a lifeline, repeating them silently to herself. Suddenly, a sound in the distance caught her attention. It was faint at first, a rhythmic thudding like the hooves of a horse. Her heart leapt. Could it be? Could someone really be coming? She tried to shout, but her voice was weak from fear and fatigue. Still, she called out with all her strength, praying that whoever was coming could hear her. The sound grew louder, closer, until she saw a shadow approaching through the dim moonlight. A tall figure on a horse emerged from the trees, riding with determination. Aisha's heart soared. The man rode quickly to the fence, his eyes sharp and assessing the situation. He demanded that her in-laws explain why she was tied like an animal. They stammered, tried to lie, but the look in the rider's eyes told them that he would not accept excuses. The man dismounted and stepped toward Aisha. His presence was strong and commanding, but there was a gentleness in the way he spoke to her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. Aisha nodded, tears streaming down her face, and felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. She didn't know who this man was, but something in him promised safety. Without hesitation, he cut the ropes that bound her hands. Relief washed over Aisha as her arms were freed. The pain and stiffness in her wrists were nothing compared to the feeling of liberation, and she clung to the hope that she might finally escape the nightmare she had lived in. Her in-laws tried to protest, but the man's firm stance and unwavering gaze silenced them. He helped Aisha onto his horse, placing a protective arm around her as he guided the animal away from the fence and the house. The cool night air brushed against her face, and she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. As they rode through the dark fields, she looked back at the home where she had suffered, feeling a mix of fear and relief. She was leaving behind not just a house, but a life of pain and humiliation. For the first time in her life, she felt hope. The road ahead was unknown, but she knew she would not be alone. The man beside her had arrived like a guardian, offering safety and protection when she needed it most. Aisha clutched the horse's reins tightly, feeling her heart steady as the moonlight guided them forward. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it. And as the village disappeared behind them, swallowed by darkness, Aisha whispered a silent promise to herself. She would never let anyone control her, never let fear dominate her, and she would one day live the life she had always dreamed of. For the first time, she truly believed that happiness was possible, and that her suffering might finally be over. The sound of hooves echoed in the quiet night as Daniel guided his horse across the open fields. He had been passing through the village on his way back to his ranch, when the sight of a young girl tied to a fence had stopped him in his tracks. At first he had thought it might be some prank or a misunderstanding, but as he drew closer, the sight of Aisha's frightened eyes and trembling body told him the truth. She had been mistreated, and she needed help. Daniel was not a man to ignore injustice. He had grown up on the ranch, learning the value of honesty, courage, and standing up for those who could not defend themselves. He knew that people often suffered in silence because they feared speaking out, but he also believed that one act of bravery could change everything. And tonight, he would act. As he approached the fence, he saw her in-laws trying to argue their way out of the situation. The mother-in-law gestured wildly, insisting that she was punishing Aisha for being careless. The father-in-law's face was red with anger, but Daniel could see the fear in his eyes. "Step back," Daniel said firmly, his voice carrying across the yard. "Untie her now. She is a human being, not an animal. You have no right to treat her like this." The relief that washed over her face was immediate and powerful. She rubbed her raw wrists, tears flowing freely now, tears of pain but also of hope. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked gently. His tone was different from the harsh voices she had endured all her life. There was no judgment, no anger, just concern. Aisha nodded shakily, unable to find her voice at first. Then finally she whispered, "Thank you." She held on tightly, not just to the reins, but to the feeling of safety that she had longed for her entire life. As they rode away from the village, the cool night air brushing against her face, Aisha began to feel a sense of freedom she had never known. The stars above shone brightly, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. She dared to believe that her suffering might finally be coming to an end. Daniel guided the horse along a narrow path that led through fields and forests. The sound of the village faded behind them, replaced by the quiet whispers of the wind and the soft clatter of hooves on the ground. He occasionally glanced back to ensure that no one was following, though he doubted anyone would dare challenge him. His focus remained on keeping Aisha safe and helping her feel secure. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "To my ranch," Daniel replied. "You'll be safe there. No one can hurt you." A ranch was a place she had only heard about in stories, a place of wide-open fields, animals roaming freely, and people living honest, hard-working lives. She had never imagined that such a place could be real, let alone a place where she could feel safe. The thought gave her courage, and she clung to it as they rode through the darkness. As they traveled, Daniel tried to make small talk to ease her fear. He asked her about her family, where she grew up, and her life before marriage. Aisha was hesitant at first, but she soon realized that he wasn't judging her or her past. She found herself speaking softly, telling him about her childhood, her dreams, and her longing for freedom. Daniel listened carefully, never interrupting, never rushing her. His patience and attentiveness made Aisha feel seen for the first time in years. She realized that kindness was not just a word, it was a way of acting, a way of living, and she had found it in a stranger. Hours passed as they rode through fields and across small streams. The darkness of the night slowly gave way to the soft glow of early morning, and Aisha began to feel a sense of calm she had never known. Her body was tired from the fear and tension of the previous day, but her spirit felt lighter. She dared to imagine a life where she could wake up without fear, where she could speak freely, and where she could be respected. At one point, they stopped by a small stream so Aisha could drink and rest. Daniel handed her a water bottle and she drank greedily, feeling the cool water refresh her body. She looked around at the forest surrounding them, the sunlight beginning to peek through the trees, and she realized just how far she had come. The journey was not just physical, it was the first step toward reclaiming her life. "Thank you for saving me," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness." As they continued their journey, Daniel spoke gently about the ranch, explaining how life there worked and how she could start anew. He told her about the animals, the work, and the sense of community that came from living in a place where people respected each other. Aisha listened eagerly, imagining a life where she could learn, grow, and heal from the pain she had endured. The sun began to rise fully, casting golden light over the fields. Aisha felt a warmth in her heart that she had not felt in years. She realized that she was no longer just escaping danger. She was moving toward hope, toward freedom, and toward a life that she could finally call her own. As they neared the ranch, Daniel slowed the horse and spoke to her gently. "We're almost there. You're going to be safe now." The ranch was bustling with life, animals moving freely, workers tending to their chores, and a sense of calm and order that was completely foreign to Aisha. She felt as though she had stepped into a different world, a world where she could finally breathe and be herself. Daniel introduced her to the ranch hands and explained that she would be staying there, safe and free. Aisha's heart raced with relief. For the first time in years, she felt that she had a place where she could belong, where she could learn, grow, and live without fear. That night, as she lay in a small, comfortable room at the ranch, Aisha reflected on everything that had happened. The fear and pain of the past were still with her, but they were slowly being replaced by hope and determination. She realized that life had given her a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. She thought of Daniel and his courage, of the way he had appeared at the right moment and offered her safety without hesitation. She understood that true kindness and bravery could change lives, and she promised herself that she would one day honor his generosity by living a life of strength and dignity. As she drifted off to sleep, Aisha felt a sense of peace she had never known. The darkness of the past was slowly fading, replaced by the light of a new beginning. And for the first time, she truly believed that happiness, freedom, and respect were not just dreams, they could be her reality. Life at the ranch was unlike anything Aisha had ever experienced. When she first arrived, she felt a mixture of fear and wonder. The world outside her in-laws' house was vast, open, and full of life. The morning sunlight reflected off the fields, and the air was fresh, scented with grass, flowers, and the faint smell of hay. For the first time in years, she could breathe freely without fear of anger or punishment. Yet, the shadow of her past lingered in her mind, reminding her that trust was not easy. Daniel noticed her hesitation. He didn't push her or demand anything from her. Instead, he offered guidance with patience, helping her adjust to the new surroundings. He showed her the stable where the horses were kept, the barn where the cows and goats lived, and the vegetable gardens that stretched across the fields. Each day, he encouraged her to explore, to learn, and to find comfort in the simple rhythms of ranch life. At first, Aisha was hesitant to interact with others. She had been isolated for so long that even friendly conversation felt foreign. But the ranch hands were kind, treating her with respect and offering help whenever she needed it. Slowly, she began to open up, learning their names, sharing small stories about her life, and laughing quietly at the little jokes they made. It was a world away from the cruelty she had endured, and the warmth of human kindness felt like sunlight on her face after a long winter. Daniel gave her small tasks at first, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, watering the plants. Each task was simple, but it gave her a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in years, she realized that her efforts were appreciated, not criticized. Each successful day, no matter how small, helped her regain the confidence that had been stolen from her. She began to see herself not as a victim, but as someone capable, strong, and worthy of respect. As the days passed, Aisha learned more about ranch life. She discovered how to care for the animals, how to plant and tend to the crops, and how to repair fences and tools. Daniel was always there to guide her, explaining each task patiently and correcting her gently when she made mistakes. His calm presence made her feel safe, and his encouragement gave her the courage to try things she had never imagined she could do. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Daniel invited her to ride one of the horses. Aisha's heart raced with nervousness. She had never ridden a horse before, and the memory of being tied to the fence made her fearful of being unsteady or falling. But Daniel stood beside her, guiding the horse and giving her instructions in a calm, reassuring voice. Slowly, she climbed onto the horse's back, gripping the reins tightly. At first, she trembled, unsure of herself, but as the horse began to move gently, she felt a thrill of freedom and joy that she had never known. "You're doing well," Daniel said, smiling at her. "Just relax and feel the rhythm. Trust the horse and trust yourself." For the first time, she felt that she could control her own life, that she could move forward without fear. The horse walked steadily, and she began to laugh softly, the sound bright and genuine. Daniel watched her with quiet satisfaction, glad to see her discovering the joy of life again. As the weeks passed, Aisha's confidence grew. She started helping more around the ranch, taking on responsibilities that she never thought she could manage. She learned how to milk cows, how to gather fruits and vegetables from the garden, and even how to help with small repairs around the property. Each task gave her a sense of pride and accomplishment, and she began to believe that she could rebuild her life on her own terms. Her relationship with Daniel also deepened. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their lives and learning from each other. Daniel never rushed her, never pressured her, and never judged her past. He treated her as an equal, someone worthy of respect and care. Slowly, Aisha began to trust him, realizing that his kindness and patience were genuine. She felt a connection that went beyond gratitude, a bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. One afternoon, while working in the vegetable garden, Aisha encountered a moment of fear. A sudden storm approached, dark clouds rolling across the sky and winds picking up rapidly. The animals grew restless, and the plants swayed violently in the gusts. Aisha froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Daniel was there immediately, guiding her and showing her how to secure the animals and protect the crops. Together, they worked quickly, and when the storm passed, Aisha realized how much she had learned and grown. She was no longer helpless. She could act, she could protect, and she could face challenges with courage. Evenings at the ranch were quiet and peaceful. Aisha would sit outside her small room, watching the sunset over the fields and reflect on her journey. She thought about the girl tied to the fence, the fear and pain she had felt, and the moment Daniel had arrived to save her. She realized how far she had come, from despair to hope, from fear to confidence. Her heart felt lighter, and she began to dream of a future she had never dared to imagine. She also began to think about forgiveness, not for the sake of those who had hurt her, but for her own peace. She understood that holding on to anger and fear would only keep her trapped in the past. By choosing to focus on the kindness and support she now had, she could build a life free from the shadows of cruelty. Over time, Aisha discovered talents and strengths within herself that she had never known existed. She was good with animals, patient with the smallest tasks, and determined to learn and grow. The ranch became more than a place of safety. It became a place of transformation, where she could rebuild her identity and reclaim her life. Daniel noticed these changes and was proud of her progress. He never boasted or praised her excessively, knowing that confidence must come from within. Instead, he offered encouragement and support, helping her recognize her own capabilities. Aisha began to see herself as someone strong and capable, someone who could face challenges and build a meaningful life. As the seasons changed, so did Aisha. She became an integral part of ranch life, respected by the workers and loved by the animals. She learned to rise early with the sun, work diligently through the day, and find moments of quiet reflection in the evenings. She felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a connection to a community that valued her and treated her with dignity. One day, as she tended to the garden, Daniel approached her with a warm smile. "You've come a long way," he said. "I knew you had strength inside you, but I'm proud to see you discovering it for yourself." She had endured pain, fear, and isolation, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She realized that her past did not define her, that she had the power to shape her own future. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the ranch, Aisha felt a quiet determination within her. She would continue to work, to learn, and to grow. She would live a life of freedom, respect, and purpose. And most importantly, she would never allow fear or cruelty to control her again. The ranch had become her sanctuary, a place where hope thrived and dreams could take root. Daniel's kindness had shown her that not all people were cruel, that courage and compassion existed in the world, and that life could offer second chances if one dared to embrace them. Aisha's journey was far from over, but she had already discovered something invaluable: the strength within herself to face the future. With each passing day, she grew more confident, more capable, and more hopeful. She had been given a gift, the chance to start over, and she was determined to make the most of it. The girl who had once been tied to a fence by cruel hands was now standing tall, learning, growing, and embracing life. She was no longer defined by her past, but by her courage, resilience, and the hope that burned brightly in her heart. And as she looked toward the horizon, she knew that her best days were still ahead. Time at the ranch continued to pass, and with it, Aisha grew stronger and more confident each day. What had once been a life of fear and pain was now replaced with a rhythm of work, learning, and quiet joy. The mornings were her favorite, when the sun painted golden light across the fields and the world felt full of possibility. She would rise early, helping Daniel and the ranch hands care for the animals, gather fresh eggs, milk the cows, and water the plants. Every task, no matter how small, reminded her that she was capable and strong. She had grown attached to the animals, who seemed to sense her gentle nature. The horses responded to her calm presence, the chickens trusted her, and even the youngest calves followed her around the pasture. Caring for them gave her a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Unlike the fear she had known in her old home, here she felt needed, valued, and respected. It was a freedom she had only dreamed of, and now it was real. As weeks turned into months, Aisha began to explore parts of herself she had never known. She found joy in the simplest things: the first bloom of a flower in the garden, the playful antics of a young horse, the warm light of the sun on her skin. She discovered her own resilience, how she could rise early, work hard, and still find energy to laugh, to dream, and to look forward to the future. Each day at the ranch strengthened her spirit, and with each passing day, the fear from her past became a little lighter, a little more distant. Daniel continued to guide her, not as a master, but as a mentor and friend. He never demanded anything from her beyond what she was willing to give, and he allowed her to find her own pace. He encouraged her to take on bigger responsibilities, like helping manage the animals or overseeing parts of the garden. He taught her how to repair fences, how to work efficiently, and even how to make decisions for herself. For Aisha, this was a new experience. She had never been trusted to make decisions before, but with Daniel's encouragement, she began to believe in her own judgment and capabilities. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Daniel said, "You've come a long way, Aisha. I can see it in everything you do. You're not the same person who arrived here months ago. I know I have the strength to protect myself, to stand up for what is right, and to live my life the way I want." And now she realized that girl was still a part of her, but she had transformed, grown stronger, and learned to hope again. The pain had not disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced by courage, resilience, and a newfound sense of freedom. Aisha began to take more initiative at the ranch. She learned to organize tasks, help guide the ranch hands, and even teach younger workers the skills she had learned. She discovered that she had a talent for leadership, a quiet confidence that inspired others. The workers admired her for her diligence, patience, and calm determination. She was no longer just a guest at the ranch. She was a valued member of the community. Daniel watched her growth with quiet satisfaction. He had rescued her from danger, yes, but he knew the true change had come from within Aisha herself. Her courage, determination, and willingness to learn had transformed her life, and he was proud to see her blossom into someone strong, capable, and confident. One day, Aisha was helping to care for a young foal that had been born only a few hours earlier. She gently brushed its soft coat, whispered soothing words, and helped it take its first unsteady steps. Watching the foal gain strength and confidence reminded her of her own journey. She had been weak and fearful when she first arrived, but now she was strong, capable, and ready to face the world. Daniel approached her, smiling warmly. "You remind me of that foal," he said. "Strong, brave, and ready to take your own steps. You've come so far, Aisha. I'm proud of you. I finally believe in myself." She realized that life was not just about survival, but about growth, learning, and finding joy even in small moments. She also learned to trust people again. The kindness and patience shown by Daniel and the ranch hands helped her heal the wounds left by her in-laws. She understood that not everyone would hurt her, that there were people who valued honesty, respect, and compassion. This realization gave her confidence to build relationships based on trust, care, and mutual respect. Aisha's mornings were filled with work, her afternoons with learning new skills, and her evenings with reflection and planning. She discovered a love for reading, often spending quiet moments by the window with a book, imagining new worlds and possibilities. She also began writing in a small journal, documenting her thoughts, feelings, and dreams. This became a way for her to process her experiences, acknowledge her growth, and look forward to the future. Over time, Aisha's presence at the ranch became a source of inspiration for others. The ranch hands admired her resilience, her willingness to work hard, and her positive attitude. Even Daniel noticed the change in the community. People who once may have overlooked her now sought her advice, appreciated her insights, and respected her leadership. She had transformed not just herself, but the environment around her, showing that courage and determination could inspire others. One quiet evening, Aisha and Daniel stood on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. The field stretched endlessly before them, filled with animals and life. Aisha took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. "I never thought I could feel this happy," she said softly. "You deserve it," Daniel replied. "You've worked hard, learned, and grown. You've earned every bit of this peace and freedom." In the months that followed, Aisha continued to thrive. She developed new skills, formed strong bonds with the people around her, and found joy in the simple pleasures of ranch life. She laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and carried herself with a grace that reflected her inner strength. She had discovered a life of freedom, dignity, and purpose, something she had never imagined possible. The girl who had once been tied to a fence, trembling with fear and hopelessness, was now a woman who stood tall, proud, and confident. She had faced cruelty and suffering, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and full of hope. Her journey had taught her that even in the darkest moments there could be light, and that courage, kindness, and determination could change a life. Aisha knew she would never forget her past, but she also knew that it no longer controlled her. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to live it fully. She had discovered the power of trust, the value of kindness, and the strength that comes from believing in oneself. And most importantly, she had found freedom, not just from fear, but freedom to dream, to grow, and to live her life on her own terms. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Aisha sat outside her small room at the ranch, reflecting on her journey. She thought of the girl tied to the fence, the fear, the pain, and the tears. She thought of Daniel, who had arrived at the right moment to offer help and safety. She thought of the animals, the fields, and the endless possibilities that lay before her. And she smiled, knowing that she had finally found a place where she could belong, thrive, and be truly happy. Aisha had endured cruelty, injustice, and fear, but she had also discovered courage, kindness, and hope. She had learned that life could be beautiful, even after suffering. She had found strength within herself and in the people who had supported her. And as she looked toward the horizon, she knew that her best days were still ahead, days filled with freedom, joy, and the promise of a life she had always dreamed of.